I need a job for my mother's treatment. The millionaire froze. The 21-year-old girl looked exactly like the woman he lost 2 decades ago. Hi, my beautiful family. May the Almighty bless you beyond measure. Fill your heart with peace, your days with hope, and your nights with comfort. May every burden you carry be lifted, and may love surround you always. Amen. If you're here with me now, please comment present. And if you feel the love and connection, comment, I am with Mr. Peter. I want to be honest with you. After working 24 hours straight, the last story I posted was only 3 minutes long and had background noise. I'm truly sorry for this mistake and promise to do better. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your endless love and support. You are my strength and my family. The mahogany doors of Brin Industries swung open with barely a whisper, but the sound might as well have been thunder for how it shattered Larry Brin's world. He sat behind his imposing desk on the 42nd floor, Manhattan sprawling beneath him like a conquered kingdom, yet feeling emptier than the day he'd built this empire. The morning interviews had blurred together, eager faces seeking employment, rehearsed answers about career goals, the usual dance of corporate hiring. At 43, Larry had perfected the art of looking interested, while his mind wandered to spreadsheets, board meetings, and the endless machinery of wealth that had consumed 2 decades of his life. Mr. Brin? His assistant Evelyn Reed's voice carried its usual professional warmth. Your 11:30 appointment is here, Jill Kelly. Larry barely glanced up from the resume in his hands. Another recent graduate, probably fresh-faced and optimistic, seeking an entry-level position in marketing. He'd seen thousands of them over the years. Send her in. The young woman who entered moved with an unusual grace, her posture straight, despite the obvious nervousness that radiated from her every step. She wore a simple navy blazer that had seen better days, her shoes polished but clearly purchased from a discount store. Larry began his standard greeting, lifting his eyes with practiced politeness. And then time stopped. The words died in his throat. His hands trembled so violently that the resume fluttered to the floor like a wounded bird. Those eyes, deep brown with flecks of gold, framed by lashes that cast shadows on high cheekbones, stared back at him with familiar intensity. The curve of her lips, the way she tilted her head slightly when uncertain, the graceful line of her neck, every detail was impossibly, heartbreakingly familiar. Mr. Brin? Jill's voice carried a slight accent, musical and warm. Are you all right? Nicole. The name crashed through his consciousness like a dam bursting. But this couldn't be Nicole. Nicole would be 41 now, and this young woman couldn't be older than 22. Yet the resemblance was so striking, so complete, that Larry felt 22 years of carefully constructed walls crumbling around him. Yes, I'm fine. He struggled to his feet, his legs unsteady. Please, sit down. I'm sorry, you remind me of someone. Jill settled into the leather chair across from his desk, her hands folded in her lap. That happens sometimes. People say I have one of those faces. One of those faces. If only she knew. Larry forced himself to focus on the present, on the young woman before him rather than the ghost she so perfectly resembled. Tell me about yourself, Miss Kelly. I graduated from NYU last month with a degree in business administration. Her voice carried determination wrapped in desperation. I know I don't have much experience, but I'm willing to work harder than anyone else you'll interview. I need this job, Mr. Brin. My mother, she's sick, and the medical bills... Her voice caught, and she took a steadying breath. I'll do whatever it takes. The way she said mother sent another shock through Larry's system. The pronunciation, the slight emphasis on the first syllable, exactly how Nicole used to say it when she spoke of her family in Ghana. His hands gripped the edge of his desk so tightly, his knuckles went white. Your mother, he managed, his voice rougher than intended. Where is she? Ghana. Jill's eyes brightened with love and worry. She raised me alone after we moved here when I was 3. She worked 3 jobs to put me through school, and now it's my turn to take care of her. The doctors say she needs surgery, but the costs... She trailed off, perhaps realizing she was sharing too much with a potential employer. Ghana. The word hit Larry like a physical blow. Nicole was from Ghana. Nicole, who had disappeared 22 years ago with only a letter, "I love you, I will be back, my mother is dying." Larry stared at this young woman, this beautiful, determined young woman who carried herself with Nicole's grace and spoke with Nicole's accent, and felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place with terrifying precision. The timeline was right. If Nicole had been pregnant when she left... "Mr. Bryn." Jill leaned forward, concern creasing her brow. "You've gone very pale. Should I call someone?" No. Larry shook his head, trying to clear the fog of memories and impossible possibilities. "Miss Kelly, you're hired." What?" Jill blinked in surprise. "But we haven't even discussed the position or salary or..." "Executive assistant. 75,000 to start. Full health benefits, and I'll advance you enough to cover your mother's medical expenses." The words tumbled out before he could stop them, driven by an overwhelming need to protect this girl who could be. That's incredibly generous, but I can't accept charity." "It's not charity." Larry's voice was firm. "You'll earn every penny. I run a demanding operation here, Miss Kelly. If you're half as determined as you claim, you'll have your hands full." Tears gathered in Jill's eyes. "Thank you. You don't know what this means to me, to my family." Family. Larry wondered if he was part of that family, if this extraordinary young woman carried his DNA, his blood, his heart in her veins. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. "Can you start Monday?" he asked. "I can start right now if you need me to." Larry almost smiled at that. The eagerness, the fierce work ethic. Whether she was his daughter or not, she had spirit. "Monday will be fine. Evelyn will handle the paperwork and show you around." Jill stood, extending her hand. When Larry took it, the contact sent electricity shooting up his arm. Her grip was firm, confident, and her skin was soft and warm. "Thank you, Mr. Bryn. I won't let you down. I know you won't." After she left, Larry stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the miniature people 42 floors below navigate their lives with purpose and direction. His reflection stared back at him, silver threading through dark hair, lines around his eyes that spoke of 2 decades spent building an empire that suddenly felt meaningless. Evelyn knocked and entered without waiting for permission, a privilege earned through 15 years of loyal service. "Well, that was interesting," she said, settling into the chair Jill had vacated. "You hired her without looking at her resume, without asking about her skills or experience, and you offered her more money than we pay department heads. She's qualified. How could you possibly know that? You barely spoke to her for 10 minutes. Larry turned from the window, his expression haunted. "Evelyn, I need you to do something for me. Discreetly. I need a complete background check on Jill Kelly. Everything. Birth records, education, family history, medical records if you can get them. Everything." Evelyn studied his face with the keen perception of someone who had watched him navigate boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. "This is about her resemblance to someone, isn't it? Someone from your past." Larry moved to his desk, pulled open the bottom drawer, and withdrew a small wooden box he hadn't opened in years. Inside, yellowed with age, was a letter written in delicate handwriting on cheap paper. He handed it to Evelyn without a word. She read it twice, her eyes widening. "Nicole Kelly. Larry, you don't think—" "I don't know what to think." His voice was raw with old pain and new hope. "But I have to find out. I have to know." Evelyn folded the letter carefully and handed it back. What if she is? What if this young woman is your daughter? Larry looked out at the city again, seeing not skyscrapers and traffic, but a small dorm room 22 years ago, candlelight flickering across dark skin, whispered promises of forever that had been broken by dawn. Then I've missed 22 years of her life. 22 years of birthdays and first days of school and scraped knees and bedtime stories. 22 years of being a father. And if she's not, then I'm a foolish old man seeing ghosts in the face of a stranger. He turned back to Evelyn. But I have to know. I have to find out what happened to Nicole, and I have to know if that remarkable young woman is my daughter. Evelyn nodded, understanding in her eyes. I'll make some calls. Discreetly. After she left, Larry sat alone in his office as afternoon shadows lengthened across the floor. He held Nicole's letter in his hands, reading words he had memorized long ago. I love you. I will be back. My mother is dying. 22 years of wondering. 22 years of a hole in his heart that success and wealth couldn't fill. 22 years of looking for Nicole's face in crowds, of starting at the sound of her accent, of loving a ghost. And now, impossibly, that ghost had walked into his office wearing a navy blazer and asking for a job. Larry closed his eyes and whispered a prayer to whatever powers governed fate and second chances. Please let her be mine. Please let her be real. Outside his windows, Manhattan hummed with the energy of 8 million stories, but Larry Bryn was only interested in one. The story that might finally explain why his heart had stopped beating the day Nicole Kelly disappeared, and why it had started again the moment her daughter walked through his door. Chapter 2. Ghosts of College Days. The autumn of 2002 painted Hartwell University in shades of gold and crimson, but 21-year-old Larry Bryn barely noticed the beauty around him as he hurried across the quad, business textbooks tucked under his arm. He was a senior, focused and driven, already accepted to several prestigious MBA programs, and dating Cordelia Sage, the blonde economics major his friends assured him was perfect wife material. Life was proceeding according to plan. Graduate, marry Cordelia, build a business empire, live the American dream his immigrant parents had sacrificed everything to give him. Then she walked into his international business ethics class on a Tuesday morning in October, and Larry's carefully ordered world tilted off its axis. She was small and delicate, with skin the color of warm caramel and eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom despite her obvious youth. Her hair was braided in intricate patterns Larry had never seen before, and she wore a simple yellow dress that looked handmade. She clutched a worn notebook against her chest and surveyed the classroom with the expression of someone trying very hard not to appear terrified. Professor Morrison gestured to the newcomer. Class, we have a new student joining us from Ghana. Nicole Kelly is here on an exchange program to study international business practices. I trust you'll make her feel welcome. Nicole Kelly. Even her name was musical. She took the only empty seat 3 rows ahead of Larry, and he found himself unable to concentrate on anything else for the remainder of the class. When she raised her hand to answer a question about economic development in West Africa, her accent was like honey and spice, her insights sharp and thoughtful. After class, Larry watched a group of students surround Nicole, their smiles sharp and predatory. "Oh my God, your accent is so cute!" squealed Jessica, Cordelia's best friend. "Say something else." "Where exactly is Ghana again?" asked Brad, the football player whose geography knowledge ended at the campus borders. "Is that in Africa? Do you live in huts there?" Nicole's smile was polite but strained. "Ghana is in West Africa. And no, we don't live in huts. We have cities, universities, hospitals, much like here. But like, really poor, right?" Jessica's voice carried the kind of casual cruelty that came from never having wanted for anything. I saw this commercial about starving children in Africa. Larry watched the light dim in Nicole's eyes, saw her shoulders stiffen with dignity and hurt. Something fierce and protective roared to life in his chest. Actually, he said, stepping into the circle, Ghana has one of the fastest-growing economies in Africa. They're a major gold producer and have significant oil reserves. Nicole, I'm Larry Bryn. Would you like to get coffee? I'd love to hear more about your perspective on international trade policies. The relief in Nicole's eyes was worth the dirty looks he received from Jessica and Brad. That would be lovely, thank you. The campus coffee shop was busy, but Larry found them a quiet corner table. Nicole sat across from him, still clutching that worn notebook, and he noticed her hands were shaking slightly. Thank you, she said quietly. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Larry's voice was gentle but firm. What they said was ignorant and cruel. You shouldn't have to educate people about basic geography and respect. Nicole studied his face as if trying to determine whether his kindness was genuine. It happens often, the questions, the assumptions. Sometimes I wonder if coming here was a mistake. How long have you been at Hartwell? 2 weeks. She smiled ruefully. It feels longer. And what made you choose to study here? Nicole's expression softened. My father died when I was 12. My mother worked 3 jobs to save money for my education. She wanted me to come to America to learn about business so I could help develop opportunities back home. She sacrificed everything for this dream. Larry felt something shift in his chest. Respect, admiration, and something deeper that he didn't yet understand. That's incredible. Your mother sounds like an amazing woman. She is. Nicole's eyes glowed with love. She says education is the one thing no one can take from you, that knowledge builds bridges between worlds. She's right. Larry leaned forward, genuinely interested. What do you want to do when you go back to Ghana? Start a business that creates jobs for women in rural areas, maybe textiles or food processing. Something that uses traditional skills but connects to global markets. Her passion was evident in every word. Ghana has so much potential, but we need better infrastructure, better access to international markets. They talked for 2 hours. Nicole was brilliant, insightful, and passionate about making a difference in the world. She was also funny, with a dry wit that caught Larry off guard, and gracious in a way that spoke of deep inner strength. When she laughed, really laughed, her whole face lit up, and Larry felt something in his chest crack open. Over the following weeks, he found excuses to see her. Study groups for their shared classes, offers to help with assignments, invitations to campus events. Each time, Nicole seemed surprised by his attention, as if kindness was unexpected. Larry learned that she lived in the International Dormitory, a concrete block building that housed exchange students but felt more like a prison than a home. She ate meals alone, studied alone, and walked across campus with the careful invisibility of someone who had learned that attention often brought pain. He made it his mission to change that. "Nicole!" He jogged across the quad on a crisp November morning, backpack bouncing against his shoulders. "Wait up!" She turned, and her smile when she saw him made his heart skip. Over the past month, that smile had become his favorite sight in the world. "Good morning, Larry. You're up early. Couldn't sleep. Too excited about Professor Chen's lecture on emerging markets today." It wasn't entirely a lie. He was excited, but mostly because it meant spending an hour in the same room as Nicole. Ah, yes, the brilliant American student who knows everything about international business. Her teasing was gentle, affectionate. "Hey, I'm still learning," especially from a certain Ghanaian expert on economic development. They walked together toward the business building, their breath creating small clouds in the cold air. Larry had broken up with Cordelia 2 weeks earlier, unable to pretend interest in her shallow conversations when his mind was constantly filled with thoughts of Nicole. Cordelia had been furious, accusing him of throwing away their future for that foreign girl, but Larry felt only relief. "Larry," Nicole said suddenly, stopping beside the fountain in the center of campus, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why are you kind to me? I mean, really. You could spend time with anyone, the popular students, the ones who fit in. Why choose the strange girl from Africa?" Larry turned to face her fully, struck by the vulnerability in her question. "You're not strange, Nicole. You're extraordinary. You're the smartest person in every class. You have more courage than anyone I've ever met, and you see the world in ways that make me want to be better. The question isn't why I choose to spend time with you. It's why everyone else is too blind to see how incredible you are." Nicole stared at him, her eyes wide and bright. "Larry ... I mean it. Every word." That night, Larry found Nicole in the library, surrounded by economics textbooks and legal pads covered with her neat handwriting. She looked up when he approached, and he saw exhaustion in the shadows under her eyes. "Rough day?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Long day. I'm working on my thesis proposal, the one that will determine whether I get funding to continue my research." She rubbed her temples. "Sometimes I feel like I'm trying to prove I belong here, that I'm worth the scholarship money, worth the risk they took accepting me." "Nicole." Larry reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The contact sent electricity shooting up his arm, and he saw her sharp intake of breath. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You earned your place here." She stared down at their joined hands. "In Ghana, I was one of the top students in my class. Here, I feel like I'm constantly swimming upstream." "Then let me help you swim." The words came out before Larry could stop them, loaded with meaning that went far beyond academic assistance. Nicole lifted her eyes to his, and in that moment, something fundamental shifted between them. The air seemed charged, electric with possibility and desire, and the terrifying recognition that they were standing at the edge of something that would change everything. "Larry," she whispered, "we shouldn't. I mean, I'm only here temporarily and you have your life planned out and forget my plans." His voice was rough with emotion. "Forget everything except this moment. Right here, right now." He leaned across the table, slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met softly, tentatively, and then with growing passion as 21 years of careful control shattered like glass. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I've wanted to do that since the first day I saw you," Larry admitted. "So have I," Nicole whispered. "But Larry, this is complicated. I'm going back to Ghana after graduation." "I know." He squeezed her hand. "We'll figure it out. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together." That night marked the beginning of the most intense, passionate, all-consuming love either of them had ever experienced. They spent every possible moment together, studying in the library, walking through the snow-covered campus, talking until dawn about their dreams and fears and everything in between. Larry introduced Nicole to his friends, despite their obvious confusion about his choices. Nicole shared stories about Ghana, teaching Larry about her culture, her family, her hopes for her country's future. They were inseparable, two halves of a whole that had finally found each other. The prejudice didn't stop. If anything, it intensified as their relationship became public. Students whispered in hallways. Professors made subtle comments about inappropriate relationships and cultural differences, and Larry's business networking contacts made it clear that dating that African girl wouldn't help his career prospects. Larry didn't care. For the first time in his life, he understood what love really meant. Not the careful arrangement he'd had with Cordelia, but something wild and pure and absolutely essential. Nicole was his air, his heartbeat, his reason for being. On a snow-covered night in February, they made love for the first time in Larry's dorm room. It was tender and passionate and perfect, and afterward, as Nicole lay sleeping in his arms, Larry knew with absolute certainty that he wanted to spend the rest of his life protecting her, loving her, building a future together. "I love you," he whispered into the darkness. "Forever and always. I love you." Nicole stirred in his sleep, murmuring his name, and Larry held her closer, already making plans. He would follow her to Ghana if necessary, or convince her to stay in America. Love would find a way. It had to. 3 weeks later, Larry woke to find Nicole's side of the bed empty and cold. On his pillow lay a letter that would haunt him for the next 22 years. "My dearest Larry, I love you more than words can say, more than my heart can hold. You have been my light in a dark place, my hope when I had none. But I must go home. My mother is dying, and I cannot stay here while she needs me. I will be back, my love. I promise you that. Wait for me. Forever yours, Nicole. I will always remember the night we promised each other forever. Hold on to that memory, as I will." Larry read the letter 20 times before the words sank in. By the time he dressed and ran to the international dormitory, Nicole was already gone. Her room was empty, cleaned out, as if she had never existed. He tried everything, calling the university's international office, contacting the Ghanaian embassy, even hiring a private investigator. But in 2003, communication with rural Ghana was nearly impossible. Mobile phones were rare, internet access limited, and Nicole Kelly seemed to have vanished as completely as if she had never existed. Now, 22 years later, sitting in his office high above Manhattan, Larry closed his eyes and remembered every detail of that last night together. Nicole's soft skin under his hands, her whispered promises, the way she looked at him as if he were her entire world. Had she been pregnant that night? Had their love created the beautiful young woman who now sat somewhere in this building, organizing his calendar and answering his phones? Larry opened his eyes and reached for his phone. "Evelyn, how's that background check coming along?" "Almost done. Larry, you need to prepare yourself. If I'm right about what we're going to find, just get me the information, please." Because if Jill Kelly was indeed his daughter, then Nicole Kelly might still be alive. And if Nicole was alive, then 22 years of heartbreak might finally have meaning. Larry Bryn had built an empire, but he was about to discover that the only treasure that truly mattered had been right in front of him all along. Chapter 3. Investigating a Heart's Mystery. 3 days after hiring Jill Kelly, Larry Bryn found himself arriving at the office 2 hours earlier than usual, his heart racing with anticipation he hadn't felt since college. He told himself it was simple curiosity. Nothing more than a successful businessman ensuring his newest employee was settling in properly. But as he watched through his office's one-way glass partition, observing Jill organize files with Nicole's precise attention to detail, Larry knew he was lying to himself. The way she tilted her head when concentrating, the graceful movement of her hands as she typed, the soft humming under her breath, a melody that tugged at memories buried so deep Larry had forgotten they existed. Every gesture was achingly familiar, like watching a ghost made flesh. "Good morning, Mr. Bryn." Jill's voice through the intercom made him jump. "I've organized your schedule for the day and prepared the Morrison contract files for your 9 o'clock meeting." "Thank you, Jill. Excellent work." Larry's voice was steadier than he felt. "Could you bring me coffee when you have a moment?" "Of course, sir." Minutes later, she knocked and entered with a steaming mug, setting it on his desk with careful precision. Larry noticed she'd somehow remembered exactly how he liked it. Black, no sugar, though he'd never told her his preference. "Jill," he said carefully, "have we met before?" "Prior to your interview." She paused, considering. "I don't think so, Mr. Bryn, though ... She hesitated, a small frown creasing her brow. "There is something familiar about you. I can't place it." Larry's pulse quickened. "Tell me about your family. Your mother in Ghana. What's her name?" "Nicole Kelly." Jill's face lit up with love and pride. "She's the strongest woman I know. She came to America for college when she was 19, but had to return home when her mother became ill." The room seemed to spin. Larry gripped his coffee mug so tightly he was surprised it didn't shatter. "She studied here?" "In America?" "Yes, at Hartwell University. She always said those were the happiest days of her life, despite the challenges." Jill's expression grew wistful. "She met someone there, fell deeply in love, but she never talks about him, just gets this sad, distant look in her eyes whenever I ask." Larry felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. The confirmation he'd been desperate for and terrified to hear, all wrapped in his daughter's innocent words, because there was no doubt now, this extraordinary young woman was his child, the product of that perfect night when he and Nicole had promised each other forever. "Mr. Bryn," Jill's voice seemed to come from far away. "You've gone very pale again. Are you feeling all right?" "Yes, fine. Just tired." Larry forced himself to focus. "Your mother, is she happy in Ghana?" Jill's smile faltered. "She says she is, but I see the sadness in her eyes. She's never married, never even dated anyone seriously. It's like part of her heart is somewhere else, waiting for something that will never come." The words hit Larry like physical blows. Nicole had been waiting, just as he had been waiting. 22 years of parallel heartbreak, of two people loving each other across an ocean of silence and separation. "She sounds like a remarkable woman," Larry managed. "She is. Everything I am, I owe to her." Jill straightened her shoulders. "Which is why I have to succeed here, Mr. Bryn. I have to earn enough to bring her to America for the surgery she needs." "What kind of surgery?" For the first time since he'd met her, Jill's composure cracked. Her eyes filled with tears she fought to contain. "She's been in a wheelchair for 22 years. An accident when I was a baby. She lost both her legs, but she's never let it slow her down, never complained, never asked for pity. She just adapted and kept moving forward for my sake." Larry's world tilted. Nicole was disabled. The vibrant, graceful woman he'd loved had been confined to a wheelchair for over 2 decades, and he'd never known. The guilt and sorrow crashed over him in waves so powerful he couldn't breathe. "Mr. Bryn!" Jill was beside him in an instant, her hand on his shoulder. "Should I call someone? You look like you're having a panic attack." "No, I'm—" Larry struggled to regain control. "I'm fine. Just processing some difficult news of my own. Please sit down. Tell me more about your mother's condition." Jill returned to her chair, concern still etched on her features. "The doctors in Ghana have done what they can, but she needs specialized prosthetics and rehabilitation that's only available here. The cost is—" She shook her head. "Astronomical. But I'll find a way. I have to." Larry made a decision that would change all their lives. "What if I told you there might be another way? That perhaps someone from your mother's past, someone who cared about her very much, might want to help?" "I don't understand." "Your mother's time at Hartwell University, the man she fell in love with. What if he never stopped looking for her? What if he spent 22 years wondering what happened to the woman he loved more than life itself?" Jill stared at him, understanding beginning to dawn in her eyes. "Mr. Bryn, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that sometimes the past finds a way to heal the present." Larry stood, moving to the window that overlooked the city. "What was your mother's maiden name, Jill?" "Kelly. Nicole Kelly." Her voice was barely a whisper. "And your birth date?" "September 15th, 2003. Larry closed his eyes, doing the math he'd already done 100 times. 9 months after that last perfect night with Nicole. 9 months after they'd made love and promised each other forever. "Mr. Bryn," Jill's voice was stronger now, demanding, "What's going on? How do you know about my mother?" Larry turned to face his daughter, because he was certain now, completely and utterly certain, and felt 22 years of carefully constructed control crumble. "Because I loved her, Jill. I loved your mother more than I thought it was possible to love another human being. And when she disappeared, she took my heart with her." The silence stretched between them, heavy with revelation and possibility. Jill's face cycled through disbelief, shock, and something that might have been hope. "You're him," she whispered. "You're the man she never talks about. The one who still makes her cry sometimes when she thinks I'm not watching." "I believe I am." "But that means—" Jill's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God! That means you're my father." The words hung in the air between them, 22 years of separation and silence, bridged by 4 simple syllables. Larry nodded, tears he hadn't shed in decades threatening to fall. "I think so, yes. I hope so." Jill stood slowly, as if in a dream. "All these years she told me my father was someone special, someone who would have loved me if he'd known I existed. She said he was kind and brilliant and passionate about making the world better." She said that. Every night when she tucked me in, she would tell me stories about this amazing man who would have read me bedtime stories and taught me to ride a bike and been proud of every A on my report card. Jill's voice broke. "She made me love you before I ever knew who you were." Larry couldn't hold back the tears any longer. 22 years of missed birthdays, first steps, scraped knees, and bedtime stories crashed over him. 22 years of being a father without knowing it, of loving a daughter he'd never met. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there." "It wasn't your fault." Jill moved closer, her own tears flowing freely now. "She never told you. She protected you from having to choose between your life here and a responsibility you didn't ask for." "But I would have chosen her, both of you. I would have chosen you every time." They stood there for a long moment, father and daughter, processing the magnitude of what they'd discovered. Finally, Jill spoke. "What happens now?" Larry straightened, feeling purpose and determination flood through him for the first time in decades. Now I go to Ghana and bring your mother home." Chapter 4. The truth confirmed. The DNA test results arrived by courier at precisely 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon that would forever divide Larry Bryn's life into before and after. He held the sealed envelope in hands that trembled with 22 years of hope and heartbreak. Evelyn sat across from his desk, having dismissed his meetings for the remainder of the day. Through the glass partition, Larry could see Jill at her desk, efficiently handling phone calls and scheduling appointments, unaware that the document in his hands held the key to both their futures. "Are you going to open it?" Evelyn asked gently. Larry stared at the envelope. Inside lay scientific proof of what his heart already knew. What every instinct screamed was true. But there was a difference between hoping and knowing, between possibility and fact. "What if I'm wrong?" he whispered. "What if I've built this entire fantasy around a resemblance and wishful thinking? Then you'll know that too. But Larry, I've watched you for 15 years. I've never seen you react to anyone the way you react to that girl. The way you look at her. It's like you're seeing a miracle. I am seeing a miracle." Larry's voice was rough with emotion. "If she's mine, Evelyn, if she's really mine. Open it." Larry tore the envelope with the same decisive motion he used to close billion-dollar deals. His eyes scanned the technical jargon, the probability percentages, the cold scientific language that couldn't begin to capture the magnitude of what it revealed. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. The papers fluttered to the desk as Larry's hands went slack. 22 years of wondering, of seeing Nicole's face in crowds, of loving a ghost, and she'd left him the most precious gift imaginable. "She's mine," he breathed. "Jill is my daughter." The words transformed everything. The ache in his chest when he looked at her, the fierce protectiveness, the overwhelming need to give her everything. It all made perfect sense now. She was his blood, his legacy, the living proof that his love for Nicole had created something beautiful and eternal. "Congratulations," Evelyn said softly. "You're a father." Larry stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Below him, Manhattan teemed with millions of people living their ordinary lives, unaware that Larry Brynn's world had just shifted on its axis. "She's been out there for 22 years, Evelyn. My daughter has been working multiple jobs, struggling to pay for her mother's medical care, never knowing she had a father who would have given her everything." "You didn't know either. But I should have. I should have searched harder, been more persistent. I should have found them." The guilt was overwhelming, crushing. How many nights had Jill gone to bed hungry while he sat in restaurants that cost more than most people's monthly salary? How many times had Nicole needed help while he built an empire that suddenly felt meaningless? "Larry, listen to me," Evelyn's voice was firm. "You can't change the past. You can only move forward. The question is, what are you going to do now?" Larry turned from the window, his expression resolving into the determined mask that had intimidated boardrooms and conquered markets. "I'm going to Ghana. I'm going to find Nicole, and I'm going to bring her home." "What about Jill? Are you going to tell her?" Larry glanced through the partition at his daughter, watching as she smiled at something on her computer screen. The expression was pure Nicole, slightly crooked, lighting up her entire face. "Not yet. Not until I know what we're dealing with in Ghana. If Nicole is as badly injured as Jill indicated, you think she might not want to see you. I think she might be ashamed. Nicole was always proud, always independent. If she's been disabled for 22 years... Larry's voice trailed off as he imagined the vibrant woman he'd loved, confined to a wheelchair, struggling with poverty and pain. She might see herself as damaged, unworthy of love. "And you need to prove her wrong." "I need to prove to her that nothing could ever make me love her less, that I've been waiting for her, just as she's been waiting for me." That evening, Larry stood in his penthouse apartment, staring at a framed photograph of Nicole he'd kept hidden in his bedroom drawer for over 2 decades. It was the only picture he had of her, a candid shot he'd taken during their last week together, when she was laughing at something he'd said. Her eyes sparkled with joy and love, her hand reaching toward the camera as if to touch his face. "I'm coming for you," he whispered to the photograph. "I'm finally coming for you." He'd already made the arrangements. His private jet would be fueled and ready by morning. He'd contacted the best private investigators in Ghana, armed them with Nicole's name and last known location. He'd transferred enough money to cover any medical expenses, any debt, any obstacle that might stand between them and their second chance. His phone rang. "Mr. Brynn?" Jill's voice was tired but determined. "I'm sorry to call so late, but I wanted to let you know I'll be taking a personal day tomorrow. My mother, she's having a bad day, and I need to call the hospital in Ghana." Larry's heart clenched. "Of course, take all the time you need. And Jill, if there's anything I can do to help..." "Thank you, Mr. Brynn. That's very kind. It's just... sometimes I feel so helpless, being so far away when she needs me." "I understand that feeling," Larry said quietly. "More than you know." After they hung up, Larry sat in his study, Nicole's letter spread before him on the antique desk that had once belonged to his grandfather. He'd read it thousands of times over the years, but tonight the words seemed to pulse with new meaning. "I will be back, my love. I promise you that. Wait for me." She'd kept her promise in a way. She'd sent him their daughter, their beautiful, brilliant daughter who carried the best of both of them. Jill had Nicole's grace and compassion, but she also had Larry's determination and business instincts. She was the bridge between two hearts that had been separated for far too long. Larry picked up his phone and dialed a number he'd memorized years ago, but never called. "Hartwell University Alumni Relations. This is Margaret. This is Larry Bryn, class of 2003. I need information about a former exchange student, Nicole Kelly from Ghana. Any contact information you might have on file." "I'm sorry, Mr. Bryn, but we can't release personal information about alumni without proper authorization. This is a family emergency. Nicole Kelly is the mother of my child, and I need to reach her." There was a pause. "I'll transfer you to our International Student Services office. They might be able to help." 20 minutes and 3 transfers later, Larry had a lead. Nicole had maintained contact with Hartwell for several years after leaving, updating them on her address and activities. The last communication was from 2010, but it included a postal address in a small town outside Accra. It wasn't much, but it was a starting point. Larry spent the night making calls, pulling strings, and using every resource at his disposal. By dawn, he had a comprehensive plan. His investigators would begin searching the moment he landed in Ghana. He'd arranged for medical consultations with the best orthopedic specialists in Accra. He'd even contacted the American embassy, ensuring that if Nicole needed to travel to the United States for treatment, all the paperwork would be expedited. As the sun rose over Manhattan, painting his apartment in shades of gold and pink, Larry made one final call. "Evelyn, I need you to do something for me. Watch over Jill while I'm gone. If she needs anything at all, you make sure she gets it. And if something happens to me in Ghana, nothing's going to happen to you. If something happens, I need you to tell her the truth. About who I am, about who she is. She deserves to know she's loved, that she's never been alone." "Larry, you're scaring me. What aren't you telling me about this trip?" Larry looked out at the city where he'd built his empire, where he'd tried for 22 years to fill the Nicole-shaped hole in his heart. "I'm telling you that some journeys change everything, that some loves are worth dying for. And some loves are worth living for," Evelyn said firmly. "Bring them home, Larry. Bring your family home." As Larry's private jet lifted off from Teterboro Airport 12 hours later, he pressed his face to the window and watched America disappear beneath the clouds. In his carry-on bag, he had Nicole's letter, the DNA test results, and a small velvet box containing the engagement ring he'd bought 22 years ago but never had the chance to give her. Somewhere over the Atlantic, flying toward the woman who'd owned his heart since he was 21 years old, Larry Bryn whispered a prayer to whatever powers governed second chances and impossible dreams. "Let her still love me. Please, God, let her still love me." Below them, the ocean stretched endlessly toward Africa, toward answers, toward a reunion that would either heal 22 years of heartbreak or destroy what little remained of Larry's faith in forever. Chapter 5. Journey to the Past. The Gulf Stream. G650 cut through African skies like a silver arrow aimed at Larry Bryn's destiny, carrying him toward a reunion 22 years in the making. Larry sat in the leather captain's chair, Nicole's faded letter spread on the mahogany table before him beside a tablet displaying satellite maps of Ghana. He'd memorized every detail of his flight plan, studied every photograph his investigators had sent from Accra, but none of it could calm the storm of emotions raging in his chest. In 18 hours, he might see Nicole Kelly again, the woman who'd owned his heart since he was 21, the mother of his child. the ghost he'd been chasing through 2 decades of empty success and hollow relationships. "Mr. Bryn?" The flight attendant's voice was respectfully quiet. "We'll be beginning our descent into Kotoka International Airport in 30 minutes. "Thank you, Sarah." Larry's voice was steadier than he felt. Through the aircraft's oval window, the landscape below had transformed from ocean blue to the rich greens and browns of West Africa. Somewhere down there, in a small town whose name he'd whispered like a prayer for the past 3 days, Nicole was living her life, perhaps thinking about the American boy she'd loved and lost, perhaps having forgotten him entirely. The thought terrified him more than any boardroom negotiation ever had. His phone buzzed with a text from Evelyn. "Jill is worried about you. She knows something's wrong but doesn't want to pry. Should I tell her anything?" Larry typed back, "Tell her I'm taking care of some old business. That everything will be clearer soon." Old business. As if 22 years of heartbreak could be reduced to such mundane words, as if the love that had shaped every decision he'd made since college was just another item on his agenda. The jet's engines changed pitch as they began their descent. Larry looked out at the sprawling city of Accra coming into view, a mixture of modern buildings and traditional structures, of wealth and poverty existing side by side. Nicole was somewhere down there, and according to his investigator's latest report, she was alive. But alive and well were 2 different things entirely. 3 hours later, Larry sat in the back of a rented Land Rover, bouncing along a dusty road that led away from Accra toward the rural district where Nicole had been traced. His driver, a cheerful man named Kwame, who spoke excellent English, had tried several times to make conversation, but Larry was too lost in memories to respond coherently. The countryside was beautiful in a way that took his breath away. Rolling hills covered in lush vegetation, small villages with colorful houses, women carrying water jugs on their heads with the same grace Nicole had once moved across the Hartwell campus. This was where she'd grown up, where she'd learned the strength and dignity that had captivated him from their first meeting. "Mr. Bryn," Kwame said, glancing in the rearview mirror, "we're approaching Aduamoa now, the village where your investigators traced your friend." Larry's heart began to pound. "How much farther? 5 minutes? Perhaps 10? The roads here are not like American highways. 5 minutes. After 22 years, 5 minutes felt like an eternity and an instant, all at once. Larry checked his appearance in the Land Rover's mirror. His normally perfectly styled hair was disheveled from the humid air, his expensive suit wrinkled from travel. He looked every day of his 43 years, marked by decades of success that suddenly seemed meaningless. Would Nicole recognize him? Would she even want to see him? The village of Aduamoa was smaller than Larry had imagined, a cluster of modest houses surrounding a central square where children played and women sold vegetables from wooden tables. Kwame navigated the narrow streets carefully, dodging goats and bicycles with practiced ease. "There," Kwame pointed to a small blue house set slightly apart from the others. "According to your men, that is where Nicole Kelly lives." Larry stared at the house. Simple concrete walls, a corrugated metal roof, a small garden where cassava and plantain grew in neat rows. It was humble, clean, and dignified, much like the woman he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "Would you like me to wait here?" Kwame asked. "Yes, please." Larry's mouth was dry. "This might take a while." He climbed out of the Land Rover on unsteady legs, his expensive leather shoes sinking slightly into the red earth. The air was thick with humidity and the sense of cooking fires and tropical flowers. Children had gathered to stare at the strange white man in the expensive suit, their curious eyes following his every movement. Larry walked slowly toward the blue house, his heart hammering against his ribs. He carried flowers he'd bought in Accra, bright orange bird of paradise blooms that reminded him of Nicole's radiant smile. In his pocket, the small velvet box containing her engagement ring seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. The house had a small covered porch with 2 plastic chairs and a table where medical supplies were neatly arranged. Larry's investigators had been thorough. Nicole worked as a community health volunteer, using her business education to help organize medical care for rural villages. Even disabled, even struggling with her own challenges, she was still trying to make the world better. Larry climbed the 3 concrete steps to the porch, his legs trembling. Through the open door, he could hear the soft sound of someone moving around inside, the whisper of wheels against a smooth floor. He knocked gently on the wooden door frame. "Come in," called a voice that stopped his heart completely. Even after 22 years, even roughened by time and hardship, Nicole's voice was exactly as he remembered, musical, warm, carrying the lilting accent that had made him fall in love with words themselves. Larry stepped into the doorway and saw her. She sat with her back to him in a simple wheelchair, wearing a colorful dress that he recognized as traditional Ghanaian kente cloth. Her hair, now shorter and streaked with premature gray, was still beautiful. She was organizing medical supplies on a low table, her movements efficient and graceful despite her obvious limitations. "Kwame, is that you?" she asked without turning around. "You're early today. I haven't finished preparing the vaccination records for the—" Nicole. The name fell from Larry's lips like a prayer, like a word he'd been saving for 22 years. Nicole froze, her hands stilling on the medical supplies. For a long moment, neither of them moved, neither of them breathed. Slowly, so slowly, it seemed to take forever, Nicole turned her wheelchair to face him. Larry felt the world tilt. She was still beautiful, breathtakingly, impossibly beautiful. Her face had matured, showing the lines of someone who had known real hardship, but her eyes were the same warm brown that had captured his soul in a college classroom. Those eyes widened now with shock, disbelief, and something that might have been joy before quickly being replaced by pain. "Larry?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "It can't be. You're not. You can't be here." "I'm here." Larry took a step forward, then stopped when he saw her flinch. "Nicole, I'm here." They stared at each other across the small room, across 22 years of separation and silence. Larry took in every detail, the way she held herself with dignity despite her obvious frailty, the medical equipment discreetly placed around the room, the photographs on the wall that showed a young woman he now recognized as Jill at various ages, pictures of his daughter growing up, pictures of birthdays and school graduations and achievements he'd never witnessed. "How?" Nicole's voice was stronger now, but Larry could hear the tremor beneath the surface. "How did you find me?" "Our daughter came looking for a job." The words hung in the air between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Nicole's face went completely pale, her hands gripping the arms of her wheelchair so tightly, her knuckles went white. "Jill," she breathed. "Oh God, Jill. She doesn't know, does she? She doesn't know who you are. She knows now." Larry took another careful step forward. "Nicole, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me know I had a daughter?" Tears began to flow down Nicole's cheeks, silent, devastating tears that spoke of 22 years of isolation and sacrifice. "Because you had a life, Larry. You had plans, a future. I couldn't trap you with a responsibility you never asked for." "Trap me?" Larry's voice cracked with emotion. "Nicole, loving you was never a trap. It was the only real thing in my life. When you left, when you disappeared." He stopped, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they'd lost. "I was coming back," Nicole whispered. "I was coming back to tell you about the baby, to ask you what we should do. I had it all planned. I would return to America. We would get married, raise our child together." Her voice broke. "But the truck, there was so much blood, and the doctor said the baby probably wouldn't survive, and when she did, when Jill lived..." Nicole sobbed openly now. I was so grateful, but I was also broken, damaged. How could I ask you to love half a woman? Larry was beside her in an instant, dropping to his knees next to her wheelchair. Nicole, look at me. Please, look at me. She raised her tear-streaked face to his, and Larry saw not damage or brokenness, but the same beautiful, strong woman he'd fallen in love with. Older, marked by suffering, but still fundamentally, essentially, Nicole. You are not half a woman, he said fiercely. You are the woman who raised our daughter alone, who worked 3 jobs to put her through school, who built a life of purpose and meaning despite facing challenges I can't even imagine. You are the strongest, most beautiful person I have ever known, and I have loved you every single day for 22 years. Nicole stared at him through her tears. Larry, you don't understand. I can't walk. I'm not the woman you remember. You're exactly the woman I remember. You're Nicole Kelly, who came to America with nothing but dreams and determination, who faced down prejudice and ignorance with grace and dignity, who taught me what real love looks like. Larry reached up to cup her face in his hands. You're the mother of my child, the love of my life, and the answer to every prayer I've whispered for the past 22 years. For a moment, hope flickered in Nicole's eyes. Then, reality crashed back, and she pulled away from his touch. Leave me, she whispered, turning her wheelchair away from him. Please, Larry, just leave me. I don't love you anymore. But even as she spoke the words, Larry could see her shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. He could hear the lie in her voice, could feel the love radiating from her like heat from a flame. I'm not leaving, he said quietly. Not again. Not ever again. Chapter 6. The Broken Beauty. Nicole Kelly sat with her back to the man who had haunted her dreams for 22 years, her heart shattering and rebuilding itself with every breath. Leave me, she repeated, her voice stronger now, fortified by decades of protecting herself from hope. I don't love you anymore. The lie tasted like ash in her mouth, but it was necessary. Larry Bryn was successful, wealthy, perfect in his expensive suit and confident bearing. He belonged to a world of Manhattan penthouses and boardroom meetings, not to this small African village where she struggled to afford medicine for her patients. Nicole. His voice was patient, gentle, exactly as she remembered from those perfect college days when love had seemed like enough to conquer anything. Turn around, please. No. She kept her back to him, focusing on the medical supplies she'd been organizing when he arrived like an answer to prayers she'd stopped allowing herself to pray. You shouldn't have come here, Larry. There's nothing for you in this place. There's you. 2 simple words that nearly destroyed her carefully constructed defenses. Nicole closed her eyes, remembering a snowy night in Massachusetts when he'd whispered those same words against her skin, when forever had seemed possible and love had felt like destiny. The Nicole you knew doesn't exist anymore. She forced steel into her voice. She died in a truck accident 22 years ago. That's not true. Nicole heard him moving behind her, his footsteps careful on the concrete floor. She wanted to flee, to wheel herself away from this conversation that was tearing open wounds she'd spent decades learning to live with. But where could she go? This was her home, her refuge, and he had invaded it with his presence and his beautiful, impossible words. It is true. Nicole's hands trembled as she pretended to sort through bandages and antiseptic. The woman you loved was whole, Larry. She could dance, she could run, she could... Her voice broke despite her efforts to remain strong. She could be the partner you deserved. Nicole, look at me. No. Then I'll sit here until you do. Nicole heard the scrape of a chair against the floor, then silence. Minutes passed. The afternoon light streaming through her small windows began to fade, painting the room in shades of gold and amber. Still, Larry waited. Finally, Nicole's resolve crumbled. She turned her wheelchair slowly to face him, and immediately regretted it. He was even more handsome than she remembered. Age had refined his features, adding silver to his dark hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of laughter and success. His suit was perfectly tailored, his shoes probably cost more than she made in a year, and everything about him screamed wealth and power and belonging to a world she could never be part of. But his eyes were exactly the same, brown and warm and filled with a love so deep it took her breath away. "There she is," he said softly. "There's my Nicole. I'm not your anything." The words came out harsher than she'd intended. "Look at me, Larry, really look at me." She gestured to her wheelchair, to her withered legs hidden beneath the colorful fabric of her dress. "This is what your Nicole became. This is what's left." Larry studied her face with an intensity that made her want to turn away again. But there was no pity in his expression, no revulsion or disappointment. Only love, deep and unwavering and terrifying in its certainty. "I see a woman who spent 22 years making the world better despite facing challenges that would have broken most people," he said. "I see someone who raised our daughter to be brilliant and kind and strong. I see the love of my life, just as beautiful as the day I met her." Nicole laughed bitterly. "You're delusional." "Am I?" Larry leaned forward in his chair. "Tell me about the accident, Nicole. Tell me what really happened." Nicole felt the familiar clench of panic in her chest. She told this story to doctors, to social workers, to the few friends brave enough to ask, but never to Larry, never to the man whose child she'd been carrying when her world exploded in metal and pain and blood. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you want to know?" "Because I need to understand, because I've spent 22 years imagining the worst, and maybe the truth will be easier to bear." Nicole closed her eyes, letting herself remember the day that changed everything. "I was coming back to you. I'd been in Ghana for 3 months, taking care of my mother, and I discovered I was pregnant. I was so happy, Larry. So scared, but so happy. You were coming back. I had it all planned. I would tell you about the baby, we would get married, maybe move to Ghana together after graduation so you could meet my family." Nicole's voice grew distant, lost in the memory. "I was on a bus from Accra to Kotoka Airport, thinking about how surprised you'd be, how we'd figure out the future together." Larry's hands clenched into fists. "What happened?" "The truck ran a red light. The driver was drunk, going too fast." Nicole's voice was clinical now, detached, the way she'd learned to tell this story without falling apart. "Our bus flipped 3 times. I remember flying through the air, then pain, then nothing. The baby, Jill, was a miracle." For the first time since Larry had arrived, Nicole's face softened with genuine joy. "The doctors said she shouldn't have survived. They said the trauma, the blood loss, the surgery to save my life, but she held on. She fought to live even when I wanted to die." "And your legs?" Nicole's expression hardened again. "Crushed beyond repair, multiple surgeries, infections, months of recovery. By the time I was stable enough to think about contacting you, Jill was 6 months old and I was—" She gestured to her wheelchair. "This. Why didn't you call me then? Why didn't you let me know what had happened?" The question she'd dreaded, the one that had tormented her for over 2 decades. Nicole looked into Larry's eyes and saw not anger but genuine confusion, as if he couldn't fathom any universe where she wouldn't have reached out to him. "Because I loved you too much to destroy your life." "Destroy my life?" "Look at you, Larry." Nicole's voice was thick with tears she refused to shed. "Look at what you've become, successful, wealthy, powerful. You have the world at your feet. And look at me, a disabled woman in a third world village struggling to afford basic medical care. How could I ask you to give up everything for this? You think I care about money? About success? Larry's voice was rough with emotion. Nicole, none of it matters. None of it has ever mattered without you. Don't. Nicole turned her wheelchair away again, unable to bear the intensity in his eyes. Don't say things you don't mean. I married someone else. The words hit Nicole like a physical blow. She'd known, of course. She'd followed his life through internet searches and business magazines, torturing herself with glimpses of his success. She'd seen the wedding photos, the society pages featuring Larry and his beautiful blonde wife at charity galas and corporate events. I know, she whispered. It lasted 8 years. We divorced 5 years ago. Larry's voice was flat, matter of fact. Do you know why? Nicole didn't answer, couldn't answer. Because every night when I closed my eyes, I saw your face. Because I called out your name in my sleep. Because no matter how much I tried to love Cordelia, no matter how perfect she was on paper, she wasn't you. Larry stood, moving closer to her wheelchair. I married her to try to forget you, Nicole, and it was the biggest mistake of my life. Stop. Nicole's voice broke. Please just stop. I kept your letter. 22 years, and I still carry it with me everywhere I go. Nicole heard the rustle of paper. Then Larry was kneeling beside her wheelchair again, holding the yellowed letter she'd written with tears streaming down her face in a hospital bed in Accra. I will be back, my love, I promise you that. Wait for me. He read softly. You kept your promise, Nicole. You sent me our daughter. I never meant she was supposed to have a normal life, away from all this. Nicole gestured to her wheelchair, her modest home, the poverty that surrounded them. She was supposed to be free. She is free, free and brilliant and beautiful, just like her mother. Larry reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. I bought this for you 22 years ago. I've been carrying it ever since, waiting for the chance to give it to you. Nicole stared at the box as if it were a snake about to strike. Larry, no. I'm not asking you to answer now. I'm not asking you to forgive me for not finding you sooner, or to pretend that 22 years didn't happen. Larry's voice was steady, certain. I'm just asking you to remember that some loves are strong enough to survive anything, including this. He placed the box on the table beside her medical supplies and stood. I'm staying in Accra tonight. I'll be back tomorrow and the day after that, and every day until you remember that you deserve to be loved. All of you, exactly as you are. Larry moved toward the door, then paused. Jill is worried about you. She wanted to come with me, but I asked her to wait in New York until I knew how you were doing. She doesn't know the whole truth, does she? Nicole's voice was barely a whisper. She knows I'm her father. She knows I loved you enough to cross an ocean to find you. But she doesn't know about the accident, about your condition. I thought you should decide how much to tell her. Nicole nodded, unable to speak past the tears clogging her throat. She loves you, Nicole. She talks about you like you hung the moon and stars. Whatever else you think you've lost, you raised an extraordinary daughter. That's not nothing. After Larry left, Nicole sat alone in her small house as darkness fell around her. The velvet box seemed to glow in the lamplight, a promise and a threat and a dream all wrapped in blue fabric. She didn't open it. She wasn't ready for that kind of hope, that kind of possibility, because despite everything Larry had said, despite the love she could still see in his eyes, one truth remained unchanged. She was broken, and he deserved someone whole. But as night settled over the village and Nicole prepared for bed, she found herself thinking not of her limitations but of Larry's words. Some loves are strong enough to survive anything. Maybe, just maybe, he was right. Chapter 7. Words Left Unspoken. The morning sun painted Nicole's small house in shades of gold and amber, but she had barely slept, her mind churning with Larry's words and the impossible presence of that velvet box on her table. She'd wheeled herself to the window a dozen times during the night, watching the empty road that led to Accra, simultaneously hoping and dreading Larry's return. He'd said he would come back every day, and Nicole knew him well enough to believe he meant it. Larry Bryn had always been a man who kept his promises. A soft knock on her door made her heart leap into her throat. "Nicole?" Larry's voice was gentle, patient. "May I come in?" She considered pretending to be asleep, but cowardice had never been her way. "The door is open." Larry entered carrying a woven basket that smelled of fresh bread and tropical fruit. He wore simpler clothes today, khaki pants and a white cotton shirt that made him look less like a Manhattan mogul and more like the college boy she'd fallen in love with. "I brought breakfast," he said, setting the basket on her small dining table. "I wasn't sure what you liked anymore, so I got a little of everything from the market." Nicole watched him unpack the basket with the same careful attention he'd once brought to studying for exams. Mangoes, plantains, fresh bread, honey and tea, simple foods that must have cost him almost nothing, yet he handled them like precious gifts. "You don't have to bring me food, Larry. I can take care of myself." "I know you can." He pulled 2 mangoes from the basket and began peeling them with a knife he'd obviously purchased for the purpose. "I wanted to, not because you need me to." The distinction mattered more than Nicole wanted to admit. She watched his hands work, older now, marked with tiny scars from years of success, but still gentle and sure. Those hands had once traced patterns on her skin, had held her close during thunderstorms, had written her love letters she'd treasured until they fell apart from reading. "You came back," she said quietly. "I told you I would." Larry looked up from the mango, his eyes serious. "I meant what I said yesterday, Nicole. All of it." "Which part? The part where you declared eternal love, or the part where you pretended my disability doesn't matter?" Larry set down the knife and moved closer to her wheelchair. "The part where I said you're the love of my life. The part where I said nothing has changed that. Everything has changed." Nicole's voice was sharp with old pain. "Look around you, Larry. This isn't the life you signed up for when you were 21. I didn't sign up for any specific life. I signed up for you." Larry knelt beside her wheelchair, bringing himself to her eye level. "Nicole, do you remember what you told me about your father's death? About how your mother worked 3 jobs to send you to America?" Nicole nodded, confused by the change of subject. "You said she taught you that education was something no one could take away from you. That knowledge builds bridges between worlds." Larry's voice was soft, reverent. "Do you know what you taught me? I don't understand. You taught me that love isn't something you take from someone. It's something you give, freely and completely, without expecting anything in return. You taught me that real beauty comes from strength, from grace under pressure, from the choice to keep going when everything seems impossible." Nicole felt tears threatening and blinked them back furiously. "Larry, let me finish, please." Larry reached out slowly, telegraphing his intention, and when Nicole didn't pull away, he took her hands in his. "You think the accident changed you, made you less somehow. But from where I'm sitting, it revealed who you really are. The woman who raised our daughter alone, who built a life of purpose despite facing challenges that would have broken most people, who still finds ways to help others even when you're struggling yourself. That woman is extraordinary." Nicole stared down at their joined hands. Larry's skin was softer than she remembered, pampered by wealth and success, but his grip was firm and warm and achingly familiar. "You don't know what it's been like," she whispered. "The pain, the limitations, the constant struggle just to afford basic necessities. There were nights when Jill was little, and I couldn't afford both food and medicine, so I went without meals for days." Larry's hands tightened around hers. Tell me all of it." And slowly, painfully, Nicole did. She told him about the months in the hospital, about learning to navigate the world from a wheelchair while caring for an infant. She told him about the jobs she'd lost because employers didn't want to accommodate her disability, about the landlords who refused to rent to her, about the countless small humiliations and large obstacles that had shaped every day of the past 22 years. Larry listened without interrupting, his face growing more pained with each revelation. When she told him about the night Jill was 5 and asked why her mother couldn't walk like other mommies, and Nicole had locked herself in the bathroom and sobbed until her daughter knocked and asked if she was okay, Larry's eyes filled with tears. "I should have been there," he said roughly, "for all of it. I should have been there to help, to support you, to share the burden." "How could you have been?" "You didn't know. But I should have known. I should have found you." Nicole pulled her hands free, needing space to think. "Larry, you can't rewrite the past. We can't change what happened. No, but we can choose what happens next." Larry stood, pacing to her small window that looked out over the village. "Nicole, I want to take care of you. Both of you. I want to bring you to America for the surgery you need. Give Jill the opportunities she deserves. Make up for 22 years of not being there. I don't want your charity. It wouldn't be charity. It would be love." Larry turned back to her, his expression fierce with determination. "I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. What good is any of it if I can't use it to help the people I love most?" Nicole felt the familiar walls rising around her heart. "And what would you want in return? A grateful woman who can never be your equal partner? Someone you can feel noble about rescuing?" "I want my family back," Larry said simply. "I want to wake up every morning knowing you're safe and cared for. I want to help Jill plan her wedding someday, to hold our grandchildren, to grow old with the woman I've loved since I was 21 years old." The future he painted was beautiful and impossible, and everything Nicole had dreamed of during the darkest moments of the past 2 decades. But dreams were dangerous things for someone who'd learned to live with harsh realities. "What about your business? Your life in New York? You can't just abandon everything for us." "Watch me." Larry's voice was steady, certain. "I can run my business from anywhere. Technology has made the world smaller, Nicole. And honestly, what's the point of success if you have no one to share it with?" Nicole stared at him, seeing the boy she'd fallen in love with beneath the successful man he'd become. The same earnest sincerity, the same willingness to fight for what he believed in, the same beautiful stubbornness that had first drawn her to him. "You're serious," she said quietly. "Completely." Larry moved back to her side, kneeling again so they were eye to eye. "Nicole, I know this is overwhelming. I know 22 years can't be erased overnight. But I'm asking you to give us a chance. Give me a chance to prove that nothing has changed how I feel about you. Everything has changed how I feel about myself." The admission slipped out before Nicole could stop it, raw and honest and more vulnerable than she'd intended to be. Larry's expression softened. "Tell me." "I used to feel beautiful when you looked at me. Confident, desirable, like I could conquer the world." Nicole's voice broke. "Now I feel broken, damaged, like half a person pretending to be whole." "Nicole." Larry reached up to cup her face in his hands, his touch gentle as a prayer. "You are the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. That hasn't changed." "How can you say that?" "Look at me. Really, look at me. I am looking at you. I see the woman who carried our child through unimaginable trauma. I see someone who spent 22 years making the world better despite facing obstacles that would have defeated lesser people. I see grace and strength and courage and beauty that goes so much deeper than anything physical." Nicole wanted to pull away, to protect herself from hope that felt too dangerous to bear. But Larry's hands on her face were warm and sure, and his eyes held nothing but truth. "I see the love of my life," he whispered. "Exactly as beautiful as the day I met her, exactly as perfect as the night we made our daughter together." This time, when the tears came, Nicole didn't try to stop them. 22 years of held-back emotion spilled over, all the grief and loneliness and desperate love she'd carried alone for so long. Larry gathered her into his arms, lifting her gently from her wheelchair to hold her against his chest. Nicole buried her face against his shoulder, breathing in the scent that was uniquely his, soap and cologne, and something indefinably warm that she remembered from their college days. "I missed you," she sobbed. "God, Larry, I missed you so much." "I know, sweetheart. I know. I missed you too." They held each other as the morning sun climbed higher, 22 years of separation slowly melting away in the warmth of an embrace that felt like coming home. Chapter 8. Daughter's Questions. 3,000 miles away in Manhattan, Jill Kelly Bryn sat at her father's imposing desk, staring at a computer screen that might as well have been written in hieroglyphics for all the attention she could pay to it. Mr. Bryn, Larry, her father, had been gone for 4 days without explanation beyond taking care of old business. Evelyn had been kind but evasive when pressed for details, and Jill's calls to his cell phone went straight to voicemail. She knew something was wrong, more than wrong. Something momentous was happening, something that involved her in ways she couldn't yet understand. The revelation that Larry Bryn was her father had turned her world upside down. 22 years of wondering about the man her mother spoke of with such love and sadness, and he'd been right here in New York all along. The coincidence felt too massive to be anything but destiny. But if Larry was her father, then where was he now, and why had he left so suddenly after dropping such life-changing news? Jill's phone rang, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. Her mother's number appeared on the screen, and Jill answered immediately. "Mama?" "Hello, my darling." Nicole's voice sounded different, softer somehow, with an undercurrent of emotion Jill couldn't identify. "How are you doing?" "I'm fine, but I'm worried about you. You sound strange. Are you feeling all right?" There was a pause, the kind of silence that spoke of words carefully chosen and discarded. "Jill, I need to tell you something about your father." Jill's heart began to pound. "What about him?" He's here, in Ghana, with me." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Jill gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles went white. "What do you mean he's there? How is that possible?" "It's a long story, my love, a very long story." "Then tell me." Jill's voice was sharp with desperation. "Mama, I've spent my entire life wondering about him, and now you're telling me he's there with you. I need to understand what's happening." Another pause, longer this time. "Your father came looking for me because of you. Because you went to work for him and he recognized..." "Recognized what?" "How much you look like me. How much you are like me." Nicole's voice was thick with tears. "Jill, he never knew about you. I never told him I was pregnant." The admission hit Jill like a physical blow. "You never told him?" "Mama, why? Why would you keep that secret?" "Because I was protecting both of you, because I thought it was the right thing to do." "Protecting us from what?" Jill heard her mother take a shaky breath, gathering courage for revelations that would change everything. "From the truth about what happened to me. About why I came back to Ghana and never left." Over the next hour, Nicole told her daughter the story she'd never heard in full, about the college romance, the pregnancy, the bus accident that changed everything. She spoke about the months in the hospital, about learning to live in a wheelchair, about the decision to raise Jill alone rather than burden Larry with a responsibility he'd never chosen. Jill listened in stunned silence, her heart breaking for both her parents. The mother who'd sacrificed everything out of love. The father who'd spent 22 years not knowing he had a daughter. "You should have told him," Jill whispered when Nicole finished. "Mama, you should have given him the choice. I know that now, but at the time I was 20 years old and terrified and convinced I was doing the right thing. And now? What's happening now? Now he's here, and he says he still loves me, and I don't know what to believe anymore." Jill could hear the confusion and hope and fear in her mother's voice. After 22 years of being Nicole's rock, of taking care of the woman who'd sacrificed everything for her, Jill suddenly understood that her mother needed taking care of too. "Do you love him?" Jill asked gently. "I never stopped loving him. That's the problem." "That's not a problem, Mama. That's a miracle." "You don't understand, Jill. I'm not the woman he fell in love with. I'm broken, limited. I can't give him the life he deserves. Have you asked him what life he wants?" Jill's voice was firm, channeling the strength her mother had taught her. "Because from where I'm sitting it sounds like he wants you, all of you, exactly as you are." After they hung up, Jill sat alone in Larry's office, processing revelations that recontextualized her entire life. Her mother's sadness, her refusal to date, her fierce protectiveness, it all made sense now. And Larry, the man she'd known for less than a week, but who felt familiar in ways she couldn't explain, wasn't just her employer, or even just her father. He was the love of her mother's life, the missing piece that had left them both incomplete. Jill made a decision that would have terrified her a week ago, but felt absolutely right now. She picked up the phone and dialed Larry's number, not caring that it was the middle of the night in Ghana. "Jill," Larry's voice was groggy, but immediately alert. "Is everything okay?" "I talked to Mama." A pause. "She told you about the accident?" "She told me everything, about why she never contacted you, about why she thought she was protecting us both." Jill's voice was steady, sure. "And I need to tell you something." "I'm listening." "You're an idiot if you let her push you away." Larry's surprised laughter carried clearly across the ocean. "Your mother said the same thing about you, that you were direct. She also said you still love her, more than my own life. Then prove it." Jill's voice was fierce with protective love. "My mother has spent 22 years believing she wasn't worthy of happiness. She's sacrificed everything for me, for her patience, for everyone except herself. If you really love her, don't let her nobility destroy your second chance." "Jill, I'm coming to Ghana." "What?" "I'm booking a flight tonight. It's time this family was together, all of us, and if Mama won't fight for her own happiness, then I'll fight for it myself." "Jill, you don't need to—" "Yes, I do." Jill's voice softened. "Larry, Dad, I've watched my mother love you from a distance for my entire life. I've seen the way she looks at your picture when she thinks I'm not watching, heard her whisper your name in her sleep. She's been half a person without you, and I suspect you've been the same without her." Larry was quiet for a long moment. "She's the strongest woman I've ever known, but she thinks her disability makes her weak." "Then remind her that strength isn't about what your body can do. It's about what your heart can endure, and her heart has endured 22 years of loving you from across an ocean." "When are you coming?" "Tomorrow. I'll email you my flight details." After they hung up, Jill sat in the gathering darkness of the Manhattan evening, thinking about destiny and love, and the strange ways families find each other across time and distance and impossible odds. Her parents had loved each other enough to create her, had spent 22 years apart, but never stopped caring, had found each other again against all possibility. Now it was up to her to make sure they didn't waste this miraculous second chance. Jill opened her laptop and began booking the most important flight of her life, not just to Ghana, but toward the family she'd dreamed of her entire life and the future that was finally within reach. Chapter 9. 3 Hearts Converging. The sound of a taxi door slamming cut through the humid afternoon air like a gunshot, freezing Larry mid-sentence as he read aloud to Nicole from a book of Ghanaian poetry. They'd spent the morning in comfortable companionship, Larry helping Nicole organize medical supplies for her village rounds, Nicole teaching him phrases in Twi that made him laugh when he mangled the pronunciation. For the first time in days, Nicole had seemed relaxed, her guard lowered enough to let glimpses of their old connection shine through. Now, hearing footsteps on the gravel path leading to her house, Nicole's entire body went rigid. "Who could that be?" she asked, wheeling closer to the window. "I'm not expecting any patience today." Larry followed her gaze and felt his heart stop. Walking up the path with determined strides, travel wrinkled but radiating purpose, was Jill. "Oh my God," Nicole breathed. "Jill! What is she doing here?" Before Larry could answer, Jill's voice rang out clear and strong. "Mama! I know you're in there, and I know he's with you." The front door was already open to catch the afternoon breeze, so Jill simply walked in, her eyes immediately finding her mother and father sitting frozen like teenagers, caught kissing on the front porch. For a moment, nobody spoke. Jill took in the domestic scene. Larry in a simple white shirt with sleeves rolled up, Nicole in a colorful dress with her hair braided in traditional patterns, a book of poetry between them, and an intimacy in their positioning that spoke of walls carefully lowered. "Well," Jill said finally, setting down her travel bag, "this is cozy." "Jill, sweetheart, what are you doing here?" Nicole's voice was a mixture of joy and panic. "You should be in New York working." "I quit." "You what?" "I quit my job, got on a plane, and came to Ghana to talk sense into my parents." Jill moved further into the room, her eyes moving between Larry and Nicole with an expression that brooked no argument. "Because apparently you both need someone to point out the obvious." Larry stood slowly, unsure whether he should embrace his daughter or prepare for battle. "Jill, I told you on the phone that you didn't need to come, and I told you that I was coming anyway." Jill's voice was firm but not unkind. "Dad? And yes, I'm calling you Dad now, so get used to it. You've been here for a week. What exactly have you accomplished?" Larry glanced at Nicole, who was staring at their daughter with a mixture of pride and terror. "We've been talking, getting reacquainted. These things take time." "Time?" Jill's voice rose. "You've both had 22 years. How much more time do you need?" "Jill, you don't understand," Nicole interjected. "This is complicated. There are things you don't know, circumstances that make this situation difficult." "You mean the wheelchair?" Jill's bluntness cut through the careful diplomacy like a blade. "Mama, do you really think I've lived with you for 22 years and not noticed that you use a wheelchair? Do you think that changes how much I love you or how much I respect you?" Nicole flinched as if she'd been slapped. "That's different. You're my daughter. And he's the man who loves you." Jill gestured toward Larry, her patience finally snapping. "The man who flew across an ocean to find you, who's been bringing you flowers and fruit like some lovesick teenager, who looks at you like you hung the moon and stars." "Jill, please," Larry started. "No, I'm not done." Jill whirled to face him, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. "And you. You claim to love my mother, but you're tiptoeing around her like she's made of glass. She's not fragile, Dad. She's the strongest woman either of us will ever meet. She raised me alone, built a life from nothing, helps half the village with their medical problems, and somehow finds time to worry about everyone except herself." Larry and Nicole stared at their daughter, stunned by the force of her anger and the accuracy of her observations. "You want to know what I see when I look at you two?" Jill continued, her voice breaking with emotion. "I see two people who've spent 22 years loving each other from a distance, who've been given a miracle second chance, and who are about to throw it away because you're both too scared to be vulnerable." "You don't understand," Nicole began. "I understand perfectly." Jill's tears came now, years of watching her mother's quiet sadness finally spilling over. "I understand that you've been half a person my entire life, Mama. I understand that you cry sometimes when you think I'm asleep, that you keep his picture hidden in your medical books, that you've never even looked at another man because your heart was somewhere else." Nicole's face went pale. "Jill, and I understand that you—" Jill turned to Larry, her voice soft with sympathy now. "You built an empire, but never had anyone to share it with. You married someone else but called out Mama's name in your sleep. You've been successful at everything except the one thing that actually matters." The room fell silent, except for the sound of Jill's ragged breathing and the distant call of birds in the afternoon heat. Finally, Larry spoke. "What do you want us to do, Jill?" "I want you to stop being afraid. I want you to remember that love isn't about perfect circumstances or ideal timing or meeting some impossible standard of worthiness." Jill looked between her parents, her voice gentling. "I want you to remember that you created me together, that your love was real enough and strong enough to make something beautiful, and that nothing that's happened since has changed that." Nicole was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face. "Jill, you don't know what you're asking. I'm asking you to let yourself be happy." Jill knelt beside her mother's wheelchair, taking Nicole's hands in hers. "Mama, you've spent my entire life telling me I was worthy of love, that I deserved all the good things the world had to offer. Did you think I wouldn't want the same for you? It's not that simple." "It is that simple." Jill's voice was fierce with love. "You love him. He loves you. Everything else is just fear talking." Larry moved closer, drawn by the raw emotion crackling between mother and daughter. "Nicole, she's right. We've lost 22 years to circumstances beyond our control. Are we going to lose whatever time we have left to pride?" Nicole looked up at him through her tears, and Larry saw the exact moment when her carefully constructed defenses began to crumble. "Larry, I'm so scared." "Of what?" "Of hoping. Of believing this is real. Of letting myself think we could actually have a future together." Nicole's voice broke completely. "What if you change your mind? What if you wake up one day and realize what you've taken on?" Larry knelt beside Jill, so both he and their daughter were at Nicole's eye level. "Then you'll remind me why I fell in love with you in the first place, and if that doesn't work, Jill will knock some sense into me." Despite her tears, Nicole laughed. "She does seem good at that." "I learned from the best," Jill said, squeezing her mother's hands. "Mama, you taught me to fight for what I believe in. You taught me that love is an action, not just a feeling. You taught me that family means never giving up on each other." "I did teach you that," Nicole whispered. "Then trust your own lessons." Jill's voice was soft but implacable. "Trust that love is worth fighting for. Trust that you deserve happiness. Trust that some promises are strong enough to survive 22 years of separation." Larry reached into his pocket and withdrew the small velvet box that had been burning a hole there for days. "Nicole, I bought this for you when we were 21 years old. I've carried it with me every day since then, waiting for the chance to give it to you." Nicole stared at the box as if it might explode. "Larry, I'm not asking you to marry me today. I'm not asking you to make any decisions or promises you're not ready for." Larry opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful solitaire diamond that caught the afternoon light and threw rainbows across the walls. "I'm just asking you to remember that some loves are forever, that some promises don't have expiration dates." Jill gasped, seeing for the first time the ring her father had chosen for her mother before she was even born. "Oh, Mama, it's beautiful." Nicole reached out with a trembling hand to touch the ring, as if touching a dream she'd given up hope of seeing realized. "You really carried this for 22 years? Every day, through business meetings and board presentations and my wedding to another woman, It was always there, reminding me that somewhere in the world, the love of my life was waiting for me to find my way back to her. I can't believe you kept it. I can't believe you thought I wouldn't. They stared at each other across the small space that separated them. 22 years of longing and loss and desperate love crackling in the air between them. Finally, Jill stood up. I'm going for a walk. You two need to figure this out without an audience. Jill, wait, Nicole called. Mama, I love you. Dad, I love you too. And I love the family we could be if you both stop being afraid long enough to reach for it. Jill headed toward the door, pausing only to look back. I'll be at the village market if you need me. Try not to waste any more time while I'm gone. After she left, Larry and Nicole sat in silence, the weight of their daughter's words settling over them like a blanket. She's remarkable, Larry said finally. She's right, Nicole whispered, about everything. I have been half a person without you. So have I. Nicole looked down at the ring sparkling in its velvet box, then up at Larry's face, older now, marked by time and success and loss, but still the face of the boy who'd defended her in college, who'd loved her with the fierce certainty of youth. I'm terrified, she admitted. Me too. What if we can't find our way back to what we had? Larry reached out and took her hands, marveling again at how perfectly they fit together. Then we'll find our way to something new, something better, built on everything we've learned in the years we've been apart. Nicole stared into his eyes, seeing not pity or obligation, but the same deep, abiding love that had sustained her through 22 years of separation. Ask me, she whispered. What? Ask me the question that goes with that ring. Larry's heart began to pound. He slipped from his chair to kneel properly beside her wheelchair, taking the ring from its box with hands that shook with emotion. Nicole Kelly, he said, his voice rough with 22 years of longing, will you marry me? Will you let me spend whatever time we have left proving that some loves really are forever? Nicole looked down at him. This man who'd crossed an ocean to find her, who'd seen her at her most vulnerable and called her beautiful, who'd waited 22 years for the chance to ask this question. Yes, she whispered, and then louder, stronger. Yes, Larry Bryn, I'll marry you. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, as if it had always belonged there, Nicole felt the last of her walls crumble. Whatever came next, whatever challenges they would face them together. For the first time in 22 years, Nicole Kelly was no longer afraid to hope. Chapter 10. Love's Final Victory. 3 days after Larry's proposal, the morning sun painted the village of Aduamoa in shades of gold and promise. But Jill Kelly Bryn sat alone on the steps of her mother's house, her heart heavy with doubt. The confrontation with her parents had achieved its intended effect. They were engaged, planning a future together, talking about bringing Nicole to America for medical treatment and starting their lives over. But something was wrong. Jill could see it in the careful way they moved around each other, in the pauses between their words, in the shadows that still lingered in her mother's eyes. Nicole was going through the motions of happiness, but she wasn't truly free. Not yet. Jill had spent the past 3 days watching her parents rediscover each other, Larry reading to Nicole in the afternoons, Nicole teaching him to cook traditional Ghanaian dishes, both of them handling each other like precious, fragile things that might break if held too tightly. It was beautiful and heartbreaking and completely wrong. Can't sleep. Larry's voice startled her from her brooding. He emerged from the house carrying 2 cups of coffee, settling beside her on the steps. Too much thinking, Jill admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. Dad, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you think Mama is truly happy? Or is she just going along with this because she thinks it's what I want? Larry was quiet for a long moment, considering the question with the same careful attention he'd once brought to million-dollar deals. "I think your mother is terrified," he said finally. "I think she spent so many years believing she wasn't worthy of love that she can't quite accept it's real." "And what are you going to do about that?" "I was hoping you might have some ideas." Jill smiled despite her worry. "Actually, I do. But it's going to require you to be braver than you've ever been in your life." "I'm listening." Inside the house, Nicole lay awake in her narrow bed, staring at the engagement ring that caught starlight from her small window. 3 days of wearing it, and she still couldn't quite believe it was real. Larry Bryn wanted to marry her. The boy she'd loved in college, the man who'd built an empire, wanted to spend his life with a disabled woman in a Ghanaian village. It felt too much like a fairy tale to be true. The rational part of her mind whispered all the reasons this couldn't work. The cultural differences, the practical challenges of her disability, the vast gap between his wealth and her poverty. Larry said none of that mattered, but how could it not? How could love be enough to bridge such enormous chasms? A soft knock on her bedroom door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Mama." Jill's voice was gentle. "Are you awake?" "Come in, sweetheart." Jill entered and settled on the edge of Nicole's bed, her expression serious in the dim light. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About the fact that you're planning to marry Dad, but you don't actually believe he loves you." Nicole's breath caught. "Jill, that's not—" "It is true, and we both know it." Jill's voice was kind but implacable. "Mama, you raised me to see through people's pretenses. Did you think I wouldn't notice when you were pretending to yourself?" Nicole sat up slowly, her daughter's perception cutting through her careful defenses like a knife. "I want to believe it, I do. But Jill, I'm so afraid of being a burden to him." "Then let him prove you're not." "What do you mean?" Jill smiled, the expression mysterious and determined. "I mean, tomorrow is market day in the village. The whole community will be there. Vendors, families, children playing. It's chaotic and loud and completely overwhelming for someone who's not used to rural Ghana." So Dad is going to push your wheelchair through the market, help you with your community health rounds, and show the entire village that he's proud to be with you. No hiding behind closed doors, no careful privacy. He's going to love you publicly, in front of everyone, and prove that his feelings aren't conditional on convenience. Nicole felt panic flutter in her chest. "Jill, I don't think—" "Mama, you've spent 22 years hiding from the possibility of love because you were afraid of being rejected. Tomorrow, you're going to find out once and for all whether that fear is justified." The next morning dawned bright and clear. Perfect weather for the weekly market that transformed Aduamoa's central square into a riot of color and activity. Nicole sat in her wheelchair outside her house, dressed in her finest kente cloth dress, watching Larry emerge from the guest house where he'd been staying. He wore khaki pants and a white shirt, simple clothes that somehow made him look younger, more like the college boy she'd fallen in love with. When he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that made her heart skip. "Ready for our first official date in 22 years?" he asked, moving to stand behind her wheelchair. "Larry, are you sure about this? The market can be intense, and everyone will stare." "Let them stare." Larry's hands were warm and steady on the handles of her chair. "I want the whole world to see how lucky I am." They made their way to the market slowly, Nicole pointing out landmarks and introducing Larry to neighbors who greeted them with curious smiles and respectful nods. Word of the American who'd come looking for Nicole had spread through the village with the efficiency of a small community where everyone knew everyone else's business. The market was indeed overwhelming. Dozens of vendors selling everything from fresh vegetables to hand-woven fabrics, children darting between stalls, the constant hum of haggling and conversation in multiple languages. Larry navigated it all with patience and humor, stopping whenever Nicole needed to check on a patient or discuss medical supplies with a vendor. Jill watched from a distance, her heart swelling with pride as she saw her father seamlessly integrate himself into her mother's world. He didn't flinch when elderly women touched his arms and spoke to him in rapid twi. He didn't complain when children surrounded them, demanding to know if he was really Nicole's boyfriend. He simply smiled and let Nicole translate, his hand never leaving her shoulder. At the fabric vendor's stall, Nicole paused to examine a bolt of beautiful blue cloth. "This would make a lovely dress," she murmured, running her fingers over the smooth cotton. "For our wedding?" Larry asked casually. The vendor, an elderly woman named Akosua, who'd known Nicole since childhood, gasped and began speaking rapidly in Twi. Within moments, a crowd had gathered, everyone talking at once. "What did you tell them?" Larry asked, laughing at the excited chatter surrounding them. "Nothing." Akosua heard wedding and apparently decided to share the news with the entire market. Before Nicole could protest, she found herself surrounded by well-wishers offering congratulations, advice, and opinions about wedding planning. Larry stood behind her wheelchair, his hands on her shoulders, smiling and nodding as if he understood every word. "Are you overwhelmed?" Nicole asked quietly. "I'm perfect," Larry replied. "Are you embarrassed to be seen with me?" Nicole looked up at him in surprise. "Embarrassed? Larry, why would I be embarrassed?" "You tell me. You're the one who's been worried about what people would think." The simple question stopped Nicole cold. She looked around at the faces surrounding them, friends and neighbors she'd known for years, people who'd watched her struggle and survive and build a life of meaning despite her challenges. Not one of them looked shocked or pitying. They looked happy, proud, as if they'd been waiting for exactly this moment. "They're not staring at my wheelchair," she whispered in realization. "No, they're not. They're looking at a woman they love and respect who's finally found her happiness." For the first time in 22 years, Nicole felt truly beautiful. Not despite her disability, not in spite of her limitations, but simply completely beautiful as exactly who she was. That evening, as the three of them sat on Nicole's small porch, watching the sun set over the village, Larry made an announcement that surprised them both. "I've been thinking about the wedding," he said, "and I've decided we should have it here, in Ghana, in your village." Nicole stared at him. "Here? But Larry, your friends, your business associates, don't need to be there for me to marry the love of my life." Larry's voice was firm. "Nicole, this is your home. These are your people. I want to marry you surrounded by the community that shaped you, that supported you, that will continue to be part of our lives. But the expense, the logistics. I have more money than sense and excellent travel agents. Consider it handled." Jill watched her parents with tears in her eyes, seeing the last barriers between them finally crumble. "When?" she asked. "Next week," Larry said decisively. "I've waited 22 years to marry your mother. I'm not waiting any longer." 5 days later, the village of Aduamoa buzzed with wedding preparations. Larry had indeed used his considerable resources to transform the simple community into something magical. Strings of lights hung between trees, flowers from Accra adorned every surface, and a small army of caterers prepared a feast that blended American and Ghanaian cuisine. But the most beautiful sight was Nicole herself, resplendent in a traditional kente gown that Larry had commissioned specially for her. The blue fabric she'd admired at the market woven through with gold threads that caught the light as she moved. She sat in her wheelchair at the front of the village square, surrounded by friends and family, watching Larry approach in a dashiki that matched her dress. Behind him walked Jill, radiant in her role as maid of honor and daughter, and the bridge between two hearts that had finally found their way back to each other. The ceremony was performed by the village elder, with translations provided for the few American guests Larry had flown in. Evelyn, Raphael, and a handful of close friends who'd watched him search for love for 22 years and wanted to witness him finally find it. When they reached the moment for vows, Larry knelt beside Nicole's wheelchair and took her hands in his. "Nicole Kelly," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the assembled crowd. 22 years ago, you taught me what love really means. Not just the feeling, but the choice, the decision to see someone completely, to accept them entirely, to commit to their happiness above your own. Nicole's tears flowed freely now, happy tears that sparkled in the late afternoon light. "I choose you," Larry continued, "not despite your challenges, but because of your strength. Not in spite of our history, but because of our love. I choose you today, tomorrow, and for every day we have left." When it was Nicole's turn, she looked into Larry's eyes and saw not the successful businessman or the wealthy American, but the boy who'd defended her in college, the man who'd crossed an ocean to find her, the partner who would stand beside her through whatever came next. "Larry Bryn," she said, her voice strong and clear, "you once told me that some loves are forever. Today I understand what you meant. Our love survived separation, silence, and 22 years of impossible odds. It survived because it was never just about us. It was about the family we would create, the daughter who would bring us back together, the future we were meant to build." She paused, looking out at Jill, who was crying openly now. "I choose you," Nicole continued. "I choose us. I choose the love that was strong enough to wait, patient enough to endure, and beautiful enough to bloom again after so many years." As the elder pronounced them husband and wife, Larry leaned down to kiss his bride, gently, reverently, as if sealing a promise that had been 22 years in the making. They both cried for everything lost, and everything still left to hold on to. The celebration lasted until dawn, with drumming and dancing and stories that would be told for generations about the American who came to Ghana for love and the woman who proved that some dreams are worth waiting for. As the sun rose over their new beginning, Larry, Nicole and Jill sat together on the porch of what was now their family home, watching the village wake up around them. "What happens now?" Jill asked. "Now we go to America for your mother's surgery," Larry said. "We get her the best medical care available, and then we figure out the rest as we go." "Together," Nicole added, the word carrying the weight of promise and possibility. "Together," Larry agreed. Some people praised their love story when news of the wedding reached the international press. Others laughed at the unlikely reunion, the fairy tale ending that seemed too perfect to be real. But Larry, Nicole and Jill no longer cared about outside opinions. Their story had found its ending, not in perfection, but in the choice to love completely, to forgive deeply, and to believe that some bonds are strong enough to survive anything. As Jill had said weeks earlier in that Manhattan office, love isn't about perfect circumstances or ideal timing. It's about seeing someone completely and choosing them anyway, day after day, for all the days you have. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, love chooses you back.